Hi, and welcome to Floridian Future, our adventure into discovering how Tallahassee works so Tallahassee does not outrun you. Today, we're going to talk to Trotter Duce. He's one of the legislative aides that I met when I was trying to get a few things done in Tallahassee. And for those of you who don't know, we're going to discover what a legislative aide is, what they do, because in reality, they kind of run the show in Tallahassee. So Trotter Duce, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to be an aide, and because you worked in the House and the Senate.
Correct.
And this is all in Tallahassee. Everything we do is Florida centric. This is all about Florida, not US. So Trotter, if you would tell us how did you become a legislative aide, and what does a legislative aide do?
Yes, thank you, Saga. So, it's very similarly structured to how it is at the federal level in DC, which is, what everyone thinks about first. We have the House and the Senate that makes up the congressional branch. So I worked for a House representative, a state rep, out of Pasco County for my first two sessions. And those are legislative sessions, happen once a year, where they get together in Tallahassee, all of the representatives and senators, and do all of the bills and budget for the year.
How did
And
you first start working for them? How did you get the job? What did you have to do?
uh, just kind of totally by luck and chance, I was in kind of another career path and had a random roommate move in with me that happened to be running a state Senate campaign at the time for soon to be Senator Jay Collins and now Lieutenant Governor. And so I just through speaking with him shortly after he moved in, he realized that I kind of had an interest in that line of work and politics in general. And so he kind of brought me on to the campaign and was telling me that it would be a good way to make connections and network and get in with an elected official after campaign season. And he was right. I got introduced to State Representative Yeager after he got elected, and so we both went into it together, like just completely not knowing anything about the process, and we both learned a lot together. So that was a really cool experience to get to learn in the House for 2 years. And then after that, I got an opportunity to join Senator Collins's office after he had an opening in his office after two sessions. So that was
So what does
really
a
cool.
legislative aide do?
So they manage the legislative agenda for a given elected official. So think their bills, their appropriations projects. So those being requests to the state for money funding for nonprofits or local municipalities, cities, counties that have infrastructure projects or other things like that, new buildings that they want to open, and yeah, they request for the state to pitch in and fund part of the project. So yeah, those are the
Well, what
main
is the
things
difference
we.
between a legislative aide and a district aide?
So we have those. We have the legislative aides, which is what I did, and then we have the district aides that manage the day to day of the district office back in the elected officials said district, given district. And so they are the ones that are mostly fielding the calls from constituents, people that call in and live in the district and have given issues. They will call and try to get help from their elected official and see if it's a issue that the state can step in and either direct them to the proper state agency to deal with the issue, or in extreme cases, the most interesting cases, I would say, even come up with a bill and a new law regarding that issue to be able to prevent anyone else from having to go through it if it's a serious enough issue.
So if I, as just a citizen of Florida, had an issue and I wanted there to be some kind of law or some kind of change in a law, and I wanted to talk to my representative or my senator about it, I would call the office and I would get the legislative aide. So, how would that work then? Walk me through how an ordinary citizen could get to talk to someone, an elected official, about an issue that they have concern about.
Yes. So that process would look like you would look up your local state representative and state senator. Always would be good to call both, cover all your bases. And you can do that on either the Florida House website, www.flhouse.gov, or the Florida Senate website, I believe www.flsenate.gov. And they both have tabs where you can search up your address and figure out who is your elected official if you don't know already. Then you can go to their tab in the website, the same website, find out what their district office phone number is, and you can give that number a call. You will either get a district aide most often, or if the district aide's busy with another constituent at the moment and a legislative aide is free, a legislative aide will pick up. So they that's another part of a legislative aide's job is when you're back in district and not in Tallahassee is you're just kind of helping the district office run and help fill in where the district aide needs help besides your other off-season duties of getting bills ready for next session and things like that.
So you're in charge also of scheduling meetings and stuff?
Correct. Yeah, for the most part, different offices do it differently, but most of the time, a legislative aide is handling the schedule for the elected official when they're up in Tallahassee. Definitely, just because the district aides don't go to Tallahassee with the members. So back in district when they're not in session, typically it depends. It'll either be a legislative aide will maintain the schedule still, or it'll be a district aide's job at that point. So either one of them will be perfect to talk to. They can hand you off to the other one if they can't deal with the specific issue you're trying to have addressed. And yeah, that's the best way to directly contact your member, I would say.
Now, do you also take meetings for, like, to learn about an issue that somebody has, so you learn a lot more in depth about that issue and then you report to the elected official? Do you ever do that?
Yes. So a lot of elected officials are very busy, as you can imagine. They have schedules kind of packed and very scheduled out into the future. So it's not uncommon for a initial phone call, initial meeting, just to kind of get all the information down to be done with a legislative aide or district aide. So I would recommend to the audience and anyone kind of interested in learning about contacting elected officials at the state level, just because you get a meeting with an aide first, that does not mean you're low priority or anything. It's just the nature of an elected official's schedule.
So if I were to meet with you, because this is actually how I met Trotter, is I was meeting with him on an issue that I had, and it was a very big, heavy lift issue. It was about a Florida sovereign state bank. Um, And it's an issue that a lot of people do not know about. And one thing I want to stress here is our elected officials, they can be pastors, teachers, plumbers, businessmen. They don't know everything about every issue. So, my assumption is, and Trotter, please correct me if I'm wrong here, is when people come to meet with you about their issue, they try to educate you as much as possible so you can pass that on to your senator or rep to see if that would be something that would interest them. So what would you recommend? How would and then also it's like 15-minute meetings.
Yes, don't be surprised if you're not able to get an hour or even 30 minutes. It's very often 15 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes, depending on the member at a time, just for the sake of trying to fit everybody in and all of the meeting requests that legislative aides get during session, especially the off season, as we call it, when they're not up in Tallahassee, when everyone's just back in their district. Typically better, typically a little more flexible, but also keep in mind that they're typically working their day jobs as well, and keeping the lights on. So they also will not be fully available either. So that's another thing to keep in mind is even if you are able to get a meeting with the member directly, you may not get as much time as you really wish you could get. So highly recommend just always keeping that in mind and being very efficient with your time when meeting with elected officials.
So, yes, and I think that's key. I think a lot of people sometimes go in and want to discuss an issue as opposed to trying to bullet point and educate. So, when you only
Correct.
have like 10 or 15 minutes, and then the other thing that I do, and I wonder, do other people do this also, Trotter? Do they? Because I would try to leave a one page sheet that would explain something. So, what do you think is the best way for somebody to convey what they wanna do and talk about the issue that concerns them?
So if you have a meeting with an aide or elected official, always good to bring in a physical, piece of literature, one pagers as we call them. It's best to keep them to one page, just for sake of keeping everything together, and simplicity and efficiency. It just helps the members kind of just have everything in one area to go and reference back to. And when they think of it again and want to go back and revisit the issue, verbal conversations are always great to drive those points home and get the initial information out there and get that interest from the member, but it's always great to leave something behind as well, on top of establishing some kind of follow up mechanism that you're going to use with either the staff or the member directly. It's usually going to be with the staff.
Okay, so let's say it's an issue that doesn't really interest the representative or the senator. How does that work then?
So different members handle it different ways. I would say definitely. Um, a lot of members will be blunt with you. I've seen where members are just kind of like that doesn't really fit kind of what my niche is and the type of policies that I typically pursue and support. So I'm going to have to pass on this. But thank you, and a lot of them maintain that respect and always appreciate people coming in and sharing their perspectives. That's kind of what the whole point of politics is about: is to maintain respect and good dialogue. So it's really cool to see that in action up in Tallahassee. Is they're not always going to agree, but to the fact that they give you their time and hear you out is something for sure that I would say a lot of other places don't get. So
Now, also, what if there's something that when the person comes in to talk to you and they have 15 minutes with you so you can present then something to your senator or your rep, and it really piques your interest? How then does that work? How influential are you as an aide with, in essence, your boss?
So that's a great question. Depending on how long an aide has been with their member, that trust gets built over time for sure, um, as well as just the inherent kind of understanding when you're brought on into an office that I've got to trust you a lot just to be able to operate in this job. So that if you can get an aide into your idea, that will definitely help to a degree. To what degree with each different member's office, I can't speak to really. But it's from personally, I can remember getting personally invested in certain bills and really, advocating and pushing like, okay, I like this one a lot. Yes, let's do this, or this, and making suggestions on how to go about running the bill or something like that, making talking points and things like that. So uh, an aide does have a decent amount in the policy agenda, but they're not shaping it. They're carrying it out at the end of the day.
And then what about, well, this is something else that we should also talk about. And this is every state is different. And again, this is only about Florida. So I know that bills to get passed have to go through the House, get a House sponsor, and the House is the House of Representatives, so they're called reps, and they have to go through the Senate, so they have to get a Senate sponsor. can you tell us the procedure or how things go from, I have this really great idea, and then what would you suggest as far as, because the person is going to then have to find a senator, have to find a rep. Can you suggest or walk us through that process?
For Sorry, I
For
had a little
any,
bit of a technical you cut out there. Can you repeat that
oh,
one more time?
for any bill to get through, to get passed, for an issue to become a law.
Okay.
Okay, it has to
Now I can
pass
hear you.
through the House and through the Senate.
Yes.
So, can you explain to us that process and how you would recommend somebody walking through that process?
So yes, you for a bill to get passed and put on the governor's desk for being written into law, it needs to pass through both the House and the Senate and their committee processes that are made up of different members from each respective body. They each have their own committees that they process the bills and advance them through before they make it to the floor, which is where they're finally passed off of into the governor's desk. So
Okay, so
it's
wait a
kind of the
second. Wait, wait,
vetting.
wait. Okay, so you're getting ahead of me here because you said they have to go through committees. So, can you explain the different committees and how that works?
So they're structured based on different topics. So if you have a bill that's heavily relating to public safety and law enforcement, there are specific committees that deal with those issues. They're made up of different, each committee, each bill goes through typically three committees on its lifespan before it gets to the floor. Um, they're gonna each one of those committees has different members, varies on the number based on which body, and
So, in the
they
House, the committees are House representatives, and in the Senate, the committees are made up of the senators.
correct. They don't. There are a few joint committees for a few niche things, but those aren't common. They're Each body has their own committees that they do their own bills from their own members that are the ones presenting each of their bills. And they each kind of judge each other's bills and critique them and work them through each committee process, each committee meeting that they have to go through. Those are kind of areas where you can get public comment. You can get comment from other members and have that be on the record of this is where I think this bill needs to be improved.
How
So
can you
that whole
get public
process
comment?
is
Like, if you're really interested in something, how can you be somebody to speak up in a committee? How does that
so yeah,
happen?
that process is in the committee process, only there's no public comment on the floor. They don't pass a microphone around the gallery when they're passing them off the floor, unfortunately. But they are able to have, if you want to travel up to Tallahassee and you're tracking a bill that you want to speak out on and make sure that the members and your elected officials know your opinion on, there will be a time in each of its committee hearings for public comment. And you attend that committee meeting. They're publicly noticed and everything during session. This all happens during the 60-day legislative session, those committee meetings up in
And
Tallahassee.
you have to be there in person?
You have to be there in person and fill out a speaker card when you enter the room. And then when it comes time for the public comment on that bill, your name will be called and you'll have, I don't, I don't know if it
I think it's
varies
3
between,
minutes.
but yeah, it's like 1 to 3 minutes, and you get to speak your piece on the bill. Obviously, there's some rules. You got to keep it PG and all of that. You can't go crazy. But yeah, you get to have a public forum where you get to speak your mind on a bill in front of the members who are about to vote on it, which is pretty neat.
Okay, so somebody, let's say we're starting in the House, and you get a rep and like, okay, really like this bill. So then their idea, well, first of all, it has to go through drafting services, right?
Yes. So a member, they have meetings with a constituent, with a local organization, what have you, and they decide, okay, I'm going to run this bill. They send it to drafting services. Each body, House and Senate, has their own drafting services within it that drafts all the bills that go through each of those bodies for their members. So they work very, very hard. uh, constantly typing and editing new bills. It's impressive work for sure. And they get that drafted up. They'll send back the first edit to the member for approval, or if it needs a few minor other tweaks, that's the time for that. And then it comes out, and the member, before the filing deadline, before session starts, they will decide whether they want to file that bill or not. House members are limited to 7 bills each session. They can only file 7. They can draft just about as many as they want, um, but they can only file 7 of them and run them through session and through the committee process and try to get them on the governor's desk ultimately.
So
Senators are
when you were a legislative aide in the House, let's say, and somebody sent something to drafting services and then they got the draft back, which is very much legalese. What was your job then? Did you look over it? What did you do?
so yep, the member and the aide, typically it's then that they'll go over the bill and try to sift through it, read through it, look for all the major portions, and you have to have a very good detailed eye to make sure there's no weird language additions that would do something unintended. So that's always something that you have to have a close eye for detail on as a legislative aide for sure. That's part of your job. Make sure that the bills are exactly as intended. That's and then bring that to your boss. Make sure that they double check and agree, and then you go ahead and file if that's a bill you want to file from there. Yeah.
Okay, and then it starts going through the committee process.
And then it goes through committee process from there. So the senators, they can file as many as they want, but ultimately the number of bills that go through are limited by each of the House members only being able to do 7. So the best way to get a bill passed on the constituent end, is to make sure that you establish a good rapport and relationship with both House members in your area and senators in your area, even if they aren't necessarily the ones that you live in their district. If you're not a direct constituent, but they're still in your area, it doesn't hurt to, bring the issue to them as it may still affect their district as well.
Because I noticed that I mean, it's like it's anybody. They have different interests and may have a higher acumen for different issues than someone that's in your district. Somebody in your
Right.
district may be all about, I don't know, parks and rec, but your issue is about healthcare, your issue is about finance, and somebody 2 districts over, they may actually be a CPA or something like that, or a banker, so they would
Right.
understand. So
Or
you're
if you're
not
doing
limited
public
to where
safety,
you live.
yep, public safety, law enforcement, and you may have a former police chief as a state representative or senator in the next district. That's good things to research and keep in mind as you're engaging with the state level political process.
Okay, and then when it goes to committees, explain what can happen in the committee.
So in the committee, obviously you have to run it through the committees, the same bill more or less. It ultimately has to be the same by the time it gets to the governor's desk. Both chambers have to agree on one bill. So ideally, you're running the same bill throughout both, but sometimes things happen and they'll get a little unaligned. But by the end, they have to be aligned. Um, so that being said, the House may love the bill, the Senate may not as a body, and even if the senator running it is very passionate about it, just based on other factors that are out of their control, and the body not wanting to address that issue that session, it can get fully passed through the House and all good to go, but then in the Senate, they didn't pass it out, and so it doesn't make it to the governor's desk. So that's one other thing to keep in mind. But in the committee process, it's getting critiqued by members of both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. They get to comment on what they think about the bill and what needs to be changed, whether it's a good bill at all. So things like that. That's the main process. It's kind of workshopping. It's a good place for them to workshop the legislation before it gets to its final presentation on the House floor or the Senate floor.
because, and the different committees have different focuses. Like, for instance, there's a committee that looks at things for, let's say, finance or rules. And there's a committee, different committees look at different aspects of it. Like, is how much is this going to cost the state? Is it not going to cost the state? What is it from this aspect or that aspect? Right. So
Right.
that's why some committee may say, oh, it's good over here. And another committee goes, yeah, but it's bad over here. And if one committee, because it goes through what, three committees, you said?
Each of them go through about 3. Sometimes it'll be 2, sometimes it'll be
Okay.
4,
So if
just
one
depends on the
committee
bill.
doesn't like it, then it's dead.
Right, yeah, if even just one committee as a body decides, all of those members with that specific interest decide that it's not something they're into, then yeah, they can just stop it right there in the process at its second stop, or for even first stop, they can just be like, no, we're not feeling it. And then you got to wait until next year and try to run it again and hope
But
they
they'll
like it
give you
again the next
notes.
year.
Won't they give you notes or
They'll give
reasons?
you notes. Yeah, that's the good thing is
Okay.
there's constant feedback, and they'll tell you exactly why. It's all open for the most part. So it's a, you know, transparent process. They just, if the issue is not something that they want to deal with, they'll tell you why. And then you either try to run it again or you work with them and try to compromise. That's what politics is all about.
That is true. And so if you have like your favorite senator and you love your senator, and you go there and he's like, yeah, rah, rah about this issue and all about the issue. But if you don't have a rep, or the other way around, you have your favorite rep, but you don't have a senator, you have to have both. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that part, that it has to have a rep and a senator. And that's why, if you think about it, it's like, oh my goodness, how does anything get passed? Because there has to be a lot of agreement, a lot of compromise, a lot of give and take, a lot of agreement to really hone these down and get them through. Although then
Exactly.
there's some that get through that make me scratch my head, but that's me.
Every
So,
year, yeah, there's a couple every year that you're like, but it's a process that is still people driven. I've seen it, you know. Just people need to be informed and engaged and know
well,
what
and then also,
their elected officials are trying to do.
talk about the timing issue, because it's like, for instance, okay, they have to have, if they're even interested, they have to have it into drafting services by this date. And if it's not in by that date, that's it. So talk about the different timing issues that come up for the reps and the senators.
Yes. So, like when Saga originally came to our office when we first met, it was a great idea, but it was such a big lift, and so many moving parts and big things that would, be changing institutionally that it just with how soon session would be starting, we just couldn't get it started in time to be able to effectively run the bill. So it's definitely something you need to keep in mind with your issue is where are we at right now? How soon is next session starting? If you're able to access how the deadlines are published with filing and drafting and all of that, all of the specific deadlines throughout session, that'll make you a much more effective advocate for just making sure that you know the timeline that the legislators are operating on themselves. So you're not calling them randomly with an issue and there's a filing deadline tomorrow and they'd love to help you, but there's actually nothing they can do just because of the schedule. So that's a good
And
thing to keep in mind
we'll
for
have
sure.
those on our website on floridianfuture.com. We'll have those deadlines listed on there. Right now,
Yeah.
Florida's session is done. They were done last week. Yes, we're going to have a special session coming up that the governor's going to call because the House did not pass a budget, and that's constitutionally, according to the Florida state constitution, that's what the House has to do. So they're having a special session for that. It doesn't mean that session's going to open up for all kinds of new bills. It's just a special session for that. But we'll have those dates on our website. And another thing, it's like what you said when I did first come to see you, and what we mean by it's a heavy lift. There's a lot of moving parts. It's a great, big, huge thing. A lot of things would have to change. Part of what I did, though, is start the education process because sometimes it takes years to get things done. And I look at it as it's an educating process, not to just focus on one senator or one rep, but look who's on the committees and talk to the different people that are on the different committees where your idea, your bill idea will be going so that you can educate them on the different issues,
Exactly.
right? So I'm trying to think now if we pretty much covered everything that the general public would need to know about how a bill goes from, oh, I've got this great idea, I'd like to see this, to getting on the governor's desk. I think we should put up the little "I'm a Bill from the House of the School of Rock." We should put that up here somewhere. But it's kind of like that. And again, every state is different. We're only concentrating on Florida. Every state, their session is also different times. Can you tell us, Trotter, about Florida's sessions? When are they? How long are they? When do they go from?
So it depends on the election cycle. So every 2 years, there's either the midterms or the general, the main presidential and elections. So every 2 years, it's going to be 1 year, it'll be in January to March. And then the next year, it'll be March to May, give or take. They each time a new speaker and Senate president come in, I think they're given the discretion of playing with those dates a little bit, but they have to work within a certain time frame just based on election cycle and what is typically the norm of how they've been doing it. So that's the time to look out is beginning of the year, January is they're definitely in session mode, either because they actually just started session or like shortly after New Year's, or they're gearing up for March being the start of session and they're already doing committee weeks, which is happens in the few months before session actually starts. And it's an opportunity for them to get the committee process started and kind of kicked off. And so they're not behind when they actually kick off session.
Now, when session starts, this does not mean the process starts for them filing the bills and sending to drafting services. That when
No, that's
session
already started.
starts, yeah, that's already
Yeah,
started. So if you're waiting until session starts to meet someone with your idea, then you
it's
can
too
meet with
late.
them and tell them your idea, and it's going to be next year or next session.
It's already a meeting for next session at that point, definitely.
Yeah. So I'm trying, okay, so now I just kind of want to go over this again. So if you have an idea, you need to get it, talk to your rep or senator way early in the year way before session starts. We'll have the dates on our website, floridianfuture.com, about when the deadline is to get something into drafting services, when the deadline is to file, when the different deadlines, because they have to know a lot before then. And then also as a citizen activist, you also have to know there's a lot of money in lobbying, and a lot of these great big huge companies pay a lot of money for people to be on your senator or on your rep way early on. So as a citizen activist, and I hope all of you join me to be citizen activists, you need to go out there and knock on doors and get to know your reps, know your senators. Don't bug them, get to know them and present your ideas. Okay. So that's one thing. Get to know when the dates are. And keep in mind also, they're learning. They're learning. They work for you. So if you ask for a meeting, you should be able to get a meeting. It'll be what, Trotter, like basically 10 or 15 minutes, and that's it. So what else would you recommend for somebody wanting to be a citizen activist and get a few
Yep.
things done?
I loved what you said about, you know, being respectful and approaching the members, in a friendly manner.
Mhm.
That not only I think is just the way to go about any interaction with people, uh, it'll definitely get you much further with your elected official if you approach them normally and not with anger. And, a lot of them can kind of feel like you're accusing them of being the core of the issue essentially when you come at them with anger with your specific issue. And so that can automatically kind of shut down the response that you'll get. So always just keeping in mind, just patience on both ends is something that, is best to be practiced.
That's true. All right. Well, I think we've covered everything pretty well here. If not, reach out to us. We have a link on there where you can connect with us, reach out to us. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can in upcoming videos and online on our website somewhere. Maybe we'll have a discussion section. But in any event, thank you very, very much for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And I hope that a lot of you do join the field in becoming citizen activists because Florida, here's my motto, Florida belongs to her people. We, the citizens, we have the power and we're the ones we vote. We're the ones that need to get good reps and good senators in there. If somebody really good is running, support them. Support them financially, support them, go out, help on, knock on doors, different things like this, and understand that what they're doing takes a lot of courage. It's a big deal. I ran for an office. You are under a lot of attack when you run for a public office. So just be respectful and know that they're learning also. And also, Florida does have term limits. So we have term limits. So always be, just be out there, be helpful. In any event, Trotter, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I think that's all I had. That was very well put. Thank you, Saga.
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much. I appreciate you listening in. Bye bye.
Bye bye.